Fitzgerald. This is Dubai Works, where we interview the business leaders making a difference in this great city.
That business with scale mobility was very interesting to me.
I like building something that has legacy.
The sponsor of today's show is eVest, a digital brokerage firm founded with the vision of bringing trust and credibility to the world of online trading. eVest provides investors with better opportunities in the online trading industry, offering self-trade service with high level of security and secured global licenses. eVest offers 100% reliable stocks with zero commission. So I just got back from the Future Investment Initiative in Riyadh, FII. I've been there 3 out of the 6 times, I think. And I mentioned that because this year was exceptional. It was full of people, but real buzzy energy about the place. A lot of American accents, a lot of investments. And I really think we go back and forth to Saudi Arabia. We have a business there since 2017 and, loving Saudi and Smashi in Arabic over there, and also loving Riyadh, loving Jeddah, loving Sharjah, and loving Neom, and it's going really well. Our country manager Iyad does a really good job at it. But what's happening in the wider space in Saudi Arabia is there are these indigenous homegrown startups like Jahez and others who are really dominating the market and providing that domestic story, not expanding per se. Some of them are, but they're really doing well in that market. And with backing, like with the initiative, with the Vision 2030, with PIF, with other support systems and the regional VCs really doing well in that market, you're seeing huge interest, not only from the region, but from the West in what's happening in Saudi Arabia. And I was really taken by when I saw some of the biggest names in the financial world on a panel, people like Ray Dalio and David Solomon from Goldman Sachs, and also Jamie Dimon. And it reminded me of when Silicon Valley was really going, and a lot of the sort of post tech bubble, like a lot of the sort of 2010 direction, big values on the stock market. The bankers in New York didn't necessarily weren't getting a cut of what the VCs were getting. And Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, sort of nurtured and cultivated that talent in Silicon Valley. And it manifested. There's an anecdote that there was one of the local basketball teams. I should know this, Golden State, I think. They had a new big stadium, and people thought it would be called the Apple Arena or the Googleplex, but it's actually called the Chase Stadium, and that's because he bid for that money. He bid money to name that stadium rights. In other words, to really sort of position their brand as a friend of the tech startups, and to be there when they IPO and to be their partner with that growth. And I think something similar is happening now in Saudi Arabia, where we will see lots of unicorns. We'll see more listings, not just semi-state companies or state companies or, really sort of legacy private companies. We're going to see a lot of startups listing in the market over there. And I think it's a fascinating space to watch, but incredible event. Privileged to be there. It's sort of pretty exclusive to get in, and really privileged to be there in a media capacity, and really made a lot of good contacts from it, and would encourage people to seek out those type of events in the region in the future, because it's great that we can go to events, and it's great that we can be there back in person. So that's a little longer intro to today's episode. It's also really interesting conversations, and we do talk a lot about the future of digital as well, with the founder of a digital transformation agency. So enjoy the conversation. Welcome back to another episode of Dubai Works Business Podcast. This week, I'm joined by Karl Escritt. He is the CEO and co-founder of Like Digital. They are an award-winning agency offering digital transformation services to the world's leading retail and luxury brands. This interesting sectors that we can talk about. So today, we'll talk about the story of Like Digital, how They work with brands in the UAE and the industry in general. Good morning, Karl.
Good morning, Richard.
Welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about Like Digital.
So I mean, as you kind of very lovely said in that opening statement, primarily what we would call a digital transformation agency right now, and there's a lot of talk around that in the industry. The agency's, I think, around 11, 12 years old. We formed it around 2011, and it started off really in that era of mobile design and mobile development, and we've really moved through the ages and moved through things, and we've got into really what is a modern world of transformation, and we're helping brands move through their digital channels, move through their digital challenges, and into the kind of really interesting world that we kind of live in right now, really. So really exciting time. The agency's transformed really from a really small shop of a couple of people to around, I think we have around 80 or so people right now globally, and growing. So
Did you start in Dubai?
Oh, we didn't actually. We started in a kitchen table in London, and as I say, it was a little bit kind of half by chance, So,
was your background in this industry?
Yeah. I mean, I've been in digital for almost 20 years now, so I kind of before probably most people can kind of remember. But in the early kind of .com bubble, which was quite interesting in those kind of early 2000 years, and then really moved through. I've worked for a number of different agencies over the years, the likes of Publicis, Sapient, which is one of the biggest.
They were well known at the time for digital work, particularly, weren't they?
Absolutely, and huge agency, very well respected, amazing clients, and doing some really phenomenal work. So I worked for that agency for a while. I've worked in-house at various brands, kind of on their emerging digital, kind of bringing them up through the e-commerce world into kind of where they are right now. And then, as I say, around 2011, mobile commerce was starting to be a thing. You had the iPhone, the kind of very early iPhones, and there was just an opportunity to say, you know what, maybe there's something in this really, and we could look at how do we begin to take brands who are kind of only really figuring out e-commerce generally, and how do we move them into the mobile space, the mobile commerce space. So that was really one of the kind of first foundations for kind of Like Digital and where we are today, really.
And Karl, how would you describe the services that you offer today?
So it's transformed, much like digital transformation, which is quite funny. So the services have transformed, and we've got a whole range of different services now. So we offer everything from strategic direction or strategic advice or guidance as you go in for your transformation journey. So that may be looking at the business and saying, okay, well, where are you right now?
Is that from a business consulting point of view or from a marketing services point of view?
Primarily from a business consulting point of view. So we'll look at brands and say, okay, where are you on your journey? What's your health? What's your digital health? What's your commerce health, or what are you trying to achieve? And really, where are your kind of current pay points, and where can you grow, and so on. So it really starts at that level now, before we really can then go into offering other services. And those services can be relatively 360, everything from user experience design to interface design, and then moving into the actual system development, content as well, not what you kind of doing from what we're experiencing today, but more from a written content, on-site content, and then everything in between, really. Then the support of the various digital channels going forward, and then of course the evolution, because the interesting thing about digital transformation is that you're always transforming. So there's no stop point. And we talk about digital transformation being quite a buzzword and a thing right now, and people going on a journey, but that journey it's kind of never ending, really.
True.
So
it's perpetually changing. Yeah, it's interesting as well because, forgive me if I'm wrong, I'm just going to put a year on that term and just say that digital transformation is kind of like 5, 6, 7 years old, but as a as a term, but when you were starting, it might have been more about they were predicting the year of mobile that kind of never came for a few years, and that was opportunity. But now, rather, is this right in saying that rather than sort of pigeonholing and say we're going to be a Web3 agency, you're just going to do, you're staying in that sort of digital transformation, which will kind of understand everything that's happening in the digital space and not just one area like mobile.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a really good point and a really interesting topic, and it's one that I kind of really thinking about on a day-to-day basis. So as I say, from a digital perspective, we started our business journey in mobile commerce because there was a real need. We saw the advent of the iPhone and how popular that was becoming. We knew that e-commerce and at this point we're talking desktop e-commerce, was beginning to become interesting from a consumer perspective, and it was going to be a natural progression. So that kind of was a little bit of luck and a little bit of foresight into what happens. But then when we look at where we are from a future perspective, and there's a lot of talk about Web3 and so on and so forth. We are still very much taking the mindset of transformation, because actually Web 3.0 or VR or NFT, whatever we kind of look at in the various hype cycles of technology, there is still a transformation journey for brands to go on, and we're just a little bit more aware of it than we once previously were.
Okay, and traditionally in this industry that you're in, you might work with clients, you might receive a digital request for a proposal, and you might submit your work. Do you still play in that space, or are you sort of in more of the consultancy arena where you're looking at outside of marketing and you're more positioned to sort of look at the, as consultants would?
No, I mean, a bit of both. I mean, we will generally get business from kind of one of three streams, either a direct word of mouth recommendation. A lot of that happens, a little bit less so these days because of the kind of work that we do. But it still happens quite a lot, through networking and through just general clients recommending clients or people moving through agencies and so on, or businesses. There's still a lot of RFP work. I mean, the agency world is generally full of RFPs, certainly in the Middle East in particular.
More so than the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. I think.
Why do you think?
I think maybe the Middle East a bit more procurement led. I think not to say that Europe doesn't have, or the UK and Europe doesn't have procurement departments. They do, but Middle East is a little bit more procurement led in that respect. So, and the procurement process is generally the route that we will follow if we're kind of going to be commissioned work in the Middle East generally.
Yeah. And the third area you mentioned, you were going to say?
Yeah, and the third area really is from us just marketing ourselves. As I say, as I was talking to you at the top of this before we jumped online, is that we didn't market the agency before, so we would generally rely on word of mouth or RFPs landing in the business. But now we're actively doing a lot more marketing, promoting the agency, sponsoring events and hosting events and so on, in order to gain a little bit more traction around what we do and the kind of journey that we can take brands on, really.
Yeah. We did have a quick chat beforehand about how usually it's all about the client and you're doing branding and marketing work for the clients. And not that you forget about your own services in your own agency, but it's almost the accepted norm that you remain discreet as an agency.
Absolutely.
Not as discreet as some of these venture capital websites. I was on one the other day and it's got no link. It's just got a word on the website.
Yeah.
But advertising agencies don't really shout about themselves, and digital ones. Do you think that that's right? And why do you think that is?
Yeah. I mean, it's something that we toy about a lot. And I often say when people, it's a little bit of a cobbler's wife scenario. It's that we're so focused on producing work or creating, things for businesses and clients that we either neglect or we don't have time to do, or we're restricted to do things for ourselves. And we have to be very discreet. We work with some fantastic brands and businesses, really pushing them into the next world and to their next direction on how they'll kind of evolve their businesses in these various digital channels. So we, as an agency, have a duty of care, really, to be discreet around what we do, and to also just ensure that there's the right balance between what we say and then also the sensitivity that we have around the work that we do.
I can understand that, particularly around clients' work and that side of things. But also, I remember coming from a similar area to you, Karl, but I remember in the UK and Ireland, reading magazines each year and the top digital agencies and magazines like New Media Age at the time. And they would often disclose the revenues as one of the criteria to be in the top 50 or whatever. And that doesn't seem to happen as much. And it doesn't definitely doesn't happen here. And we're quite, as a company, as a media publisher, broadcaster, we're quite transparent with our, not necessarily our client work, and it's different to agencies because it's not as, we're not on retainers per se, and we're not open to seeing all the marketing plans for the year. It's more kind of project based, but we disclose our revenue. And I was chatting to a friend the other day who has an agency and asked me, why do we do that? And I kind of said, well, I don't believe that, a private company means that you're not on the public markets. It doesn't mean that you have to be private, but also that, maybe that we would like to be on the public markets in the future. And I think transparency is important. But, do you think that is that something that you would disclose? Like, if I asked you now what your revenue forecast for this year is, would you disclose it?
I mean, there's nothing really from our perspective. I think it's an interesting question. I think, in the oldest days of advertising, I mean, not that long ago, but I feel like not that long ago, but probably was quite a while ago. We were talking a lot about media spend. We talked a lot about campaign spend. How much were X brand spending on this? How much were X brand spending on this, and so on. And so there's a lot of conversations around that. Such brand are going to put so much into outdoor, such brand are going to put X amount into the agency, and they've got a multi-million dollar account and so on. Fair enough. It was relatively straightforward to work it out. So I could work out the number of an agency in London by understanding
what they've won
and so on. And you used to see a lot of that. I think and you still do to a certain extent, I think, in probably some of the other ad agencies, but from a digital agency's perspective, there is generally, I guess, a bit of secrecy around who's won what. There's very little disclosure around how much a brand has to spend on X amount and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So, but that was a very political.
I noticed. So I'm not getting a number.
Yeah, but from our perspective, I mean, we've publicly announced our growth. We're talking around where we're going, how we're growing over the next kind of couple of years. So we're expecting to finish 2022 at around $7 million in kind of global revenue, give or take. Obviously, dependent on the UK pound to dollar exchange.
The change that's happening there. Yeah, and I'm not asking just to pry. It's just for industry, for people to understand, because there's also in an emerging market, there's the IAB do a lot of work around market sizing and developing different ecosystems, and it's just interesting to know where the industry is, where the employment is, the size of the industry, size of the skill sets, and many things, and where spend is going. And to that point, of the breakdown, where is your services or where is your work done? Is it more on the consulting side? Is it on the design side of digital or the development or content?
Yeah, I mean, it's so we generally will split the services into a number of sectors. So what we call it consulting or strategy. And then we have what we will look at design, and that encompasses experience design, user experience design, product design in that. And then we have development, and that development is split into a number of sectors again. So whether it be back-end system development, front-end development, support, retainer-based development, or actual granular product development. And then we have the content side of the business, which primarily loops back into the very beginning, because you can't launch a a digital product, a digital site, an app without content. And so when I talk about content, I'm talking about product descriptions, articles, how the user navigates and the language and the words that they see on the page as they move through the journey of the site. And that we opened the content division of the agency around 3 years ago, and that was primarily based on that there was a bit of a gap between digital moving at a pace at which clients and businesses couldn't grasp the amount of content that was needed in order to kind of allow it to be a good experience.
Yeah.
So that's been a quite a successful department for us, and one that we will kind of grow, going. And then actually the final section is in our research and development department.
Okay. Which would entail.
So that's primarily around new technology, things that are not necessarily revenue generating yet, but could be in the future. Experiments, things that are trial and error. What I like to call kind of the ability to fail and the need for failing, because we're in this industry where not everything works, and if you've been in this industry as well for quite some time, and you see a lot of things come and they go and so on. So we really need an area to say, well, we'll try this out. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't.
And that's not a revenue stream. That's
not necessarily. I mean, if we're lucky, maybe it generates revenue.
Yeah.
But usually we will allocate X amount of money to that department on a yearly basis, and then try things out. We will maybe do pieces of work with businesses who are really interested in a new technology space, or they'll part fund and we'll part fund, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, interesting way to look at it. Yeah, when you were talking about content, digital really is a hungry beast, isn't it?
It's huge.
Never full.
yeah, and that's it. And if you have a relatively large site, let's say whether it be an e-commerce site or a hospitality site, you need an enormous amount of content, and we have content. Usually, what we will split into 3 different categories. One being kind of hero content, so that's all of the content that you do when you land on the page. So you've got your big banners saying, "Hey, let's go and buy these pair of jeans," or whatever it may be. You then have your hub content, which is the kind of stuff, the sticky stuff, the stuff around blogs and articles, the things that bring people back, and really kind of get them to stay on the site for a period of time before they may make a purchase. And then finally, you have the content that is there to kind of assist. So it's the signposting, it's your your hygiene content and so on. And this really it's a lot of work for businesses to get a hold of. And I think we as an agency recognize that, and will help brands navigate through that, and also kind of keep it up to date and make sure that it's actually converting as well.
What's the breakdown of categories? Is it F&B? Is it fintech? Is it government? Or rough split?
Well, the UK and European side of the business is primarily e-commerce, so it's split. Probably around 70% of the business is e-commerce from a UK and European office perspective. We have a UK office and one in Paris, and the rest of that business is split between fast-moving consumable goods, a little bit of hospitality, and so on. Some aviation, which is a new sector that we're kind of really getting into. And from a Middle East perspective, a lot of hospitality, as you can expect. But then the rest of the business again is e-commerce and then some leisure and government work.
And e-commerce, you're not managing the inventory, you're managing the digital presence. But are you doing the performance marketing as well?
No, I mean, so we don't really tackle that sector. But from a commerce perspective, we will look at for everything from a strategic perspective to a design and implementation perspective, content, as we mentioned. And then really what we look at, the next real sector for us from a mainly from a commerce perspective, but from another areas, is personalization, really. So that personalization of the site, personalization of the assets, personalization of the content, and just general personalization of the experience. That's probably, I think, is the most exciting thing around digital transformation at the moment. It's probably still a little bit under looked from a business perspective. There's a lot of brands that are doing it really, really well, but there's a real opportunity around personalized experiences online, and that's really a big area for us at the moment.
And before we move into industry, I just want to ask one more question about like digital. So what was the trigger to be present in Dubai and in the Middle East? Was it a client led, or was it an opportunity that you and your co-founders saw?
It's a very good question. Very good question. I mean, And
when did it happen?
Well, around 2017, I think we opened the office here, and I'd been back and forth for around 6 months prior to that. But we were doing a very interesting piece of work for General Mills in the UK, and we had, through one of the people we were working for General Mills, we had a connection to a series of offices here that had a number of digital agencies, and they saw the work, were quite interested in the evolution of e-commerce in the Middle East, and at that time we had kind of a reasonably good e-commerce folio, so they helped fund the business in the Middle East. It took a little bit of time, but it's been been quite successful, and we've really grown to life. I live here now. We've really grown to love it, so that's the kind of potted history. So we didn't know an awful lot about it, but before we came in 2017, but it's proven to be really great, and there's an enormously vibrant, exciting digital market as well as new e-com.
And market entry for agencies is always an interesting thing. Was it how many co-founders? Is it two?
So there's two co-founders, and we've evolved. We have a board and a series of other shareholders as well, who have invested in the agency over the last 5 or 6 years.
And when you were deciding to be here, was it decided that one of your partner would stay in the UK or Europe, and you would handle this region?
That was it. Something like that. Wasn't as so I came over to help set up, find an office.
Where did you find your office?
So we registered at DMCC.
Okay.
We had some advisors who helped us kind of navigate the landscape and so on and so forth. Because as I say, we didn't know an awful lot about. I'd been a couple of times and so on. So they helped navigate the office setup and various. They had a couple of clients that we were fortunate enough to kind of have when we kind of joined and so on. So that was it was yes, and then out of kind of like a bit of I was just happened to be here, and then it just 6 months turned into 12, and 12
happened that way,
and then so on and so forth.
It's the way it tends to.
So it is what it is. But I've my family live here now. Really grown to love it. We have a great life, and the agency has really cemented its roots in Dubai.
It's an interesting case study because not every service company succeeds in that transition, and people would love to know why. What were the learnings? It clearly wasn't plug and play. You clearly had to adapt. No.
There was certainly no plug and play. And I was speaking to an MD of another agency a few months ago, having dinner with him, and he said to me, he said most other agencies, they just move to the next city, so your UK will open a Paris office, or will open an office in Germany, or so on. It's like not many people go from the UK to the Middle East or Dubai, because it's not exactly a half an hour flight. He had a point, but at the moment I didn't really think about that 5 or 6 years ago. So it wasn't really plug and play, and there was a lot of difficulty, primarily personal adaptation. So it's a different lifestyle. It's a different way of doing business. It's a different digital economy.
Different broader economy as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it was doing business on a day-to-day basis is quite different to that from a UK perspective. You have to learn the brands, and I'm very familiar with the brands and how they operate, and we've also got a big network in the UK. We came to Dubai with none of that. I wasn't familiar with the structure of how the groups work, and and so on and so forth. It's also quite different from a kind of granular level. The usage of technology and so on and so forth. So that took a couple of years to kind of figure out. So really 2017 and 2018 was really navigating the landscape. We were fortunate to have some investment in order to help navigate that landscape. But coming out of 2018 and into 19, when we really began to find our flow, we really adapted the business model to work for the Middle East and the UAE.
And then the pandemic happened.
Well, that was exactly. So and then that came along. So we were just finding the flow, and then the pandemic happened. So,
but it wasn't. You didn't retreat. You didn't give up on here when the pandemic happened. Did you think about that? You might have to for a moment in March 2020.
I think it was scary for everybody. I think it was. There was a moment where I think kind of a lot of our clients. We're quite nervous around what the future looks like and so on. And then even from an e-com perspective, which doesn't require you to go to a physical location or interact with a physical person. You were talking about the warehouses were not open, and so on. So it was, people really didn't know what to do in those early stages. So we just certainly had 3 months of real challenges trying to figure out like what this world looked like. And now we look back at it and we say, okay, we know digital's thriving, and it was a real kind of growth sector during COVID. But that first 3 months, I think the whole world, including digital, didn't really know how to adapt, So
definitely, yeah. But you obviously stayed and kept going. So just talk to me a little bit about, independent agencies. Usually, and this may be generalizing, they would look at one of the holding companies and they could be acquired. And you mentioned investment. What do you think the new status quo is for a service-based agency? Not only how do you survive with digital transformation, but what's the sort of business outlook? What's the view of the market on these type of businesses? Are they needed? Can they survive? And, can they be part of holding groups in the future? That will they and you remain independent?
I mean, it's a good question. I think I generally will see it probably into 3 categories. You still have the big conglomerates, your WPPs and your Publicists and so on and so forth. And they do incredible work. They have, very large accounts. And on the very other end of the scale, you have a kind of a lot of small shops who are, will do a site for $10,000 or so on and so forth, or maybe less in some respects. But then, kind of in the middle is a series of agencies that are extremely good. They have great service offering, and they're really dealing with clients who are kind of moving through digital in a very, very different way from what we've ever previously experienced. You've got brands who maybe haven't had a great bricks and mortar presence, but are really dominating things from a online perspective. You've got pure play e-commerce brands and so on and so forth. So it's and obviously a whole range of different startups and so on. But you have a real mix of opportunity. So that means that brands and businesses need agencies that are a little bit more agile, but experienced. And I think that's kind of where our kind of raison d'etre is, to a certain extent, is we're small enough to be agile. but then experienced enough to really, we've got a lot of experienced people in the team who've been doing this for a number of years, and they can really offer not just the advice around what's happening in the right now, but then also what's going on in the future, and so on and so forth. So it's that agility and experience, I think, is key. The whole surfer and the oil tanker kind of thing is, we're not quite the surfer, but we're not the oil tanker either.
Yeah, interesting analogy for this region as well with the environmental changes that are going on. But so, just a question about, related to that around your offering. Do you think, Karl, that some of the services in digital have been commoditized over the years, like video and things like that?
Yeah, I do, and I think you'll probably see more of it. I think, and I think it will probably hit a number of digital agencies. If you look at development, for example, it's probably very much a commodity. If I'm talking around the programming and code, there is a lot of need for something, and therefore it must be then commoditized, and it's often commoditized to a price perspective. So how low can I get this thing coded for, or this thing done? So, and that really is a commodity in itself. You then have other areas which are much harder to commoditize. So strategy, user experience design, user interface design, just personalization, and so on. So you have areas that are and the reason I think they can't be commoditized is because they need human interaction. And it's very difficult to commoditize something that needs a human being in order to make a decision or do something off the back of it.
Human being with experience and understanding of the
because
challenge.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and actually there are human beings using these products and services. So you can really only get that kind of insight from another human being. Okay, well, how does that happen? You can't necessarily get it from, obviously you can have the data and things behind it, but there is a human touch to at the end of it. But then you've seen things like AI generated video, AI generated imagery, and so on. And so we're going to see more of this happen. But where it will sit is kind of, it will be an interesting journey, I think.
And the personalized shopping part of it, what's happening there? What's happening with e-commerce now, with social, and what stage are we at this year? What are the kind of trends that you're seeing?
So a lot of personalization, and Netflix is the king of personalization. You built an entire business on personalization and AI generated decisions. And many brands now are bringing that into their day to day, because we've probably subconsciously we are realizing that if we don't get personalized information and personalized content, then the drop-off rate is quite high. So this talks about, so we're all individuals, and we all have our own likes, and we have our own needs, and we all have our own wants at any particular moment of time. So any business that is serving content or experiences in a digital channel needs to be aware of that. So when I land on your site at this particular time, you need to understand as much about me as you can, and then serve me the things that I want and I'm going to engage with, or I will just go somewhere else.
Okay.
That's really, I think, is where the big kind of trend is. It's really hyper personalization, and on a day-to-day granular level. So I really kind of, I'm guided through an experience that is catered for me. I'm not talking completely uniquely for me, but for my needs, and it makes it accessible in that way.
Does that become more challenging in the end of the third-party cookie and with less sort of third-party data?
Without a doubt, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible. So it will. You'll probably see a need of there'll be more logged in states. There'll be more account-based things. Less inferred data. So no doubt the cookie rules that are again going to come up again are going to cause some issues to this. But we will still see it as the kind of the greatest part of interaction, the greatest success. The more personalized content you can deliver, or the more personalized of an experience you can deliver, the more likely a user is going to convert.
Yeah.
And that's regardless of whether you're on social, or whether you're on a site, or whether you're on an app, or whether you're in e-com, or whether you're in the media business. People are so accustomed and have such a demand for things that they want. We will see an era of just non-tolerance towards anything that's irrelevant, basically.
So it's heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think the targeting, the third-party led data targeting usually is a conversation around advertising. And you gave a really interesting example. Like Netflix didn't need that to provide something relevant to people. Yeah. They were able to do it based on behavior on their platform.
Exactly. And I think, it's easy for Netflix because, once upon a time, and for those people who remember Netflix in the very early days, it kind of surfaced just content that it had purchased from various other movie studios that they would no longer thought, it's kind of bottom pile of the DVD stuff.
Yeah, it was a library of DVDs online.
Their personalization algorithm has become so sophisticated that it now understands, okay, well, X people watch this here in this country and so on, and we will generate and create content off the back of that. Now, for that's obviously a multi-billion-dollar business model, but the theory and the concept is relatively straightforward, and any brand can really deliver off the back of that. It's really, okay, understand the consumer. Like, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? What do they want to see? When do they drop off? When do they engage? Okay, great. Well, that works. That doesn't work, etc. And it's the more businesses lend to that model, the more success you'll see, because it's a competitive market out there, and it's becoming more and more competitive. And consumers are becoming more and more demanding around their needs, basically.
What's your view on sort of outside of digital agency and services? What's your view on the e-commerce in the region in terms of marketplaces, individual people having product-based e-commerce platforms, or that shift from sort of that digital transformation from bricks to mortar to online and that as well? Like, where do you think we are? Are we still behind the UK, or do we still have a way to go?
I think there's been an amazing development over the last since COVID, and this huge ambition. Some in brands and some of the brands that we're working with are doing incredible work in order really to propel their e-commerce transformation journey. So that it's kind of leagues ahead. And I think it's very, very sophisticated at the moment, not just from a design, operational, and system integration perspective also, but from a logistic perspective and so on. I mean, the likes of, Unas and Namshi. I mean, it's as good as anywhere, if not better than anywhere.
Last mile delivery, user experience, incredible. I mean, it's payment gateways, everything's there.
And it's come on leaps and bounds, and this is really why Dubai now is becoming this digital hub for the world, because we've got incredible support in the country, and people are really taking this seriously. They want the best, and actually the best is happening, and it's really impressive, I think, from where we are right now, and I think it can only evolve and get better, I think.
If a client asked you went back to your desk now, Karl, and they said, I want an e-commerce strategy for NFTs, what would you tell them?
It's a very interesting question. I kind of, I'm getting asked about this quite a lot, really? Not just by clients, but, I write for a lot of publications here, very similar kind of questions. It's a hot topic. What we would probably do is go back and say, okay, well, let's look at where are you on this journey? Yeah. Now, would we do it? Like, would we say, okay, well, we're going to go away and do something, and at the end of it, you're going to have an NFT strategy? Maybe the answer is no, because I think really I'm a firm believer of, okay, well, is it right for the brand? Yeah. So there's maybe something you can do. It may be right for your brand. It may be right for your consumer. Let's if we've worked with you already, then we probably would have an understanding of around, and maybe we're already in conversations. If you're new to the agency, there'd be a level of exploration around, okay, this is where you are. This is where you are in your transformation journey. This is how this may slot in. But one of the big questions I'd be asking is around, okay, well, what do you want as a return? Are you looking for, is this a marketing strategy? Or are you actually looking for a genuine return off the back of that? So there's a lot of, things that we can kind of ask and explore before we actually get to okay, well, we're definitely going to deliver you an NFT strategy and so on. Because for me, I think, digital is around the consumer, and there must be a consumer need, and if there's a consumer need, there's interest, and there is return, and there is, you get consumer evangelists and some brand evangelists, and that's success, because ultimately we want to create brand success. So
Yeah, that's a good answer. It relates to the position that you talked about at the start of like digital. It's not like saying NFTs is, 10 years ago when a client would say, I want a mobile app, and you would deliver it, versus wondering, do they need an app at that point?
Exactly.
And some people, like you remember back then, some brands launched apps for campaigns, mobile apps, before they had a brand app, before they had an app strategy. So sounds like it's similar. And rather than position yourselves as, let's just launch a bunch of NFT projects because we can generate quick revenue there, let's ask the question of where does this fit in general?
Exactly. And I think what comes with experience is advice, and you would advise on whether or not this is the right strategy. Now, you do an NFT, you get a lot of column inches. So if your objective and your return is to get a lot of column inches, then okay. But if your objective is to generate revenue, then or create bigger consumer interest, I mean, this is what are you trying to do in your actual in the kind of transformation journey of going on this? And I think that's really the questions around that we would try and facilitate out of any business that asks that kind of question.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Coming to the end, you've been in the region now 5 years. Sort of what's the sort of medium to long term view of the region, and the short term view? It's obviously, it goes without saying, it's a buoyant sort of Q4 in the region with the World Cup, with events and good weather and everything like that. So how are you looking at the short term and long term view in the region, specifically around maybe other market entries and expansion?
Yeah, I mean, it's an enormously exciting time. I mean, Dubai is an incredibly exciting place to be here at the moment. The Middle East is enormously exciting. I mean, plans for the business really is we're opening an office in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in Q1 next year. I'm heading there next week in order to help kind of facilitate that, which is great. We're very excited about that. We're also excited around the UK relations with the UAE. I mean, we're a UK formed business. And with what's happening with the UK and the trade agreements and stuff with UAE, we're getting a lot of interest on brands coming into the UAE and the Middle East in general, looking at how they can expand their presence from a digital side of things. So that's extremely exciting. Those two kind of elements really are really some key areas of growth. And then really off the back of that is I guess the excitement around new technology as a whole, the future of where we are kind of going, not just, I guess, in that next stage of transformation. Once we are kind of, once we have the basics and a great foundation in place, it's like, okay, well, what's next? And I think Dubai is an incredibly exciting place for those conversations.
Absolutely. Seems to be pioneering on what's next with future and digital, doesn't
Absolutely.
it? Brilliant. Pleasure talking to you this morning,
too.
Karl. And we'll
Richard.
keep an eye out for digital in future.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
that was a really fun conversation. Karl and I actually chatted for another good 10 minutes after we stopped recording. Very similar industries, very similar space, and very impressed with what they're doing and can learn a lot from them. I hope you enjoyed it too. Thank yous, the usual big thank yous to our team here at Augustus Media. I'd like to thank Shahir and Ali, the producers of the show, and also would like to thank our sponsors, eVest, for making this possible. If you're listening or watching or anything on the apps or social media, please do like, comment, subscribe, and share with a friend or anyone in the industry you think might be interested. Every week we have different guests. Next week it goes to property, real estate section, and we go back and forth in different industries, different sectors. Every Fridays at 11 o'clock. You will also get it on the Smashy apps. You'll be able to watch in full. We've just gotten fancy new shiny iOS and Android mobile apps, smart TV apps, and we're available on smart TVs as well. So Sony and Samsung and the likes. All right. Speak to you next week.